Hi students, welcome to lesson number 16, Sanskritisation and Desanskritisation. Now let us start with the introduction. The caste system is far from rigid system in which the position of each component caste is fixed for all time. Movement has always been possible and especially in the middle regions of the hierarchy. A low caste was able in a generation or two to rise to a higher position in the hierarchy by adopting vegetarianism and teetotalism and by Sanskritizing its ritual and pantheon. The term Sanskritisation was first used by M.N. Srinivas to describe the process of cultural mobility in the traditional social structure of India. Now let us know the objectives of the lesson. To understand the meaning of the concept Sanskritization process, to know the impact of and the changes occurring due to Sanskritization process. Understand the meaning of Sanskritization. The term was originally popularized by M.N. Srinivas in his dissertation, where he used it to characterize the gradual upward movement in the social status of a caste by means of the deliberate adoption of social and religious practices such as vegetarianism, employment of Brahmin priest, use of meatless offerings, Sanskrit mantras and other elements of Brahminical cultic practice that are associated with Brahmins or deemed prestigious because they are approved or promulgated in Brahminical literature or by Brahmin authorities in other fora. Regardless of whether the Sanskrit language is used to express those ideals, it has subsequently been found useful to analyze the broad historical trends, including the assimilation of regional, tribal, caste specific or the folk beliefs, legends and practices into Brahminical literary and ritual tradition, often fostered by the rulers who sought to legitimize their authority by linking it to Brahminical institutions such as the rituals and textual traditions and by importing and patronizing Brahmin groups. The spread of the use of Sanskritic as a language of high cultural expression is one of the important and characteristic features of this process, but not an indispensable one. The term Sanskritization has been criticized on various grounds and alternatives have been proposed, but all of which seem to suffer from similar limitations. One fundamental criticism is that these terms might seem to imply that the Brahmanica, Hindu, Sanskritic culture is a totalizing monolithic entity that is capable of overwriting the weaker traditions which are inherently disparate and vulnerable. In fact, the term and the concepts that it denotes still has great utility, provided that we remain fully cognizant of the many ways in which other traditions have through history and still today left their imprint upon Brahminical Hinduism. In fact, in spite of many broad continuities over time, it is this reciprocal give and take between what are considered established Sanskritic elements at any given time, those that have more localized currency in time, space or social register that give Hinduism its famous appearance of unity in diversity. Both modes of Sanskritization bear comparison with similar processes elsewhere, such as Hellenization in North Africa and Western Asia, especially after Alexander, the interactions of Christianity with local and folk traditions and so forth. All of these are particular large scale cases of syncretism or syncretization. The concept Sanskritisation was first introduced by Professor M.N. Srinivas, the famous Indian sociologist. He explained the concept of Sanskritisation in his book Religion and Society Among the Cooks of South India, to describe the cultural mobility in the traditional caste structure of Indian society. In his study of the cooks of Mysore, he came to know that the lower caste were trying to raise their status in their caste hierarchy by adopting some cultural ideals of the Brahmins. As a result, they left some of their ideals which are considered to be impure by the Brahmins. To explain this process of mobility, Srinivas used the term Brahmanization. Later on, he called it Sanskritisation in a broad sense. Defining Sanskritisation, Srinivas writes that Sanskritisation is a process by which a lower caste or tribe or any other group changes its customs, rituals, ideology and way of life in the direction of higher or more often twice born caste. Now, let us look into the characteristics of Sanskritisation. Sanskritisation is a process of imitation in Indian society. The social status of an individual is fixed on the basis of caste hierarchy. There are many lower caste who suffer from economic, religious or social disabilities. So, in order to improve the status, the lower caste people imitate the lifestyle of the upper caste people. Sanskritisation is a process of cultural change towards twice born caste. Sanskritisation is a process in which the lower caste adopt the cultural patterns of the higher caste to raise their status in the caste hierarchical order. In some societies, the lower caste people followed not only the customs of the Brahmins, but also the customs of the locally dominant caste like Kshatriyas and Vaishyas to raise the status. Sanskritisation is helpful in the social mobility of lower caste. In this process, a caste is only trying to change the status and not the social structure. Sanskritisation process also followed by the tribals, where we find the Sanskritisation process is not only confined to the caste people of Hindu society, it is also found among the tribal societies. The concept of Sanskritisation has also given rise to Desanskritisation. There are some instances in modern times, some of the higher caste are imitating the behavior patterns of lower caste, and for example, Brahmins have started taking meat and liquor. This process is called Desanskritisation. The models of Sanskritisation, where you find the Sanskritisation may follow any of the following models, such as 1. The cultural model, 2. The Varna model, 3. The local model. Cultural model, where caste have been assigned high or low status according to the cultural characteristics of Hindus. The wearing of sacred thread, denying the use of meat and liquor, observing endogamy prohibition of widow, remarriage, observing the restrictions in caste system, worship according to the modes and methods of described in the religious textbooks, giving respect to the religious and mythological stories, etc., have been given sanctity in traditional culture. They are considered to be the measuring standards of sacredness and purity. Accepting these behavior and the codes of highness and purity as described in religious text in a form is Sanskritisation. Varna model, where we find the Varna system, which is the highest status, is given to that of a Brahmin, followed by Kshatriya, Vaishya and Sudra. Antyaj, or the lowest, is the fifth Varna, that is the lowest and untouchable one in the Varna system. The lower caste copying the ideals and lifestyle of the superior caste. Where the Kshatriyas enjoy superiority, the lower caste followed their lifestyle and ideals. Simultaneously, where the Vaishyas enjoy superiority, the lower caste followed their lifestyle and ideals. Only the Antyaj or lower caste copy the Sudras. That is to say, emulating the lifestyle or ideals of Varna on the basis of honor and superiority enjoyed by that class is called Varna model or Sanskritisation. The local model, in every country, some castes are considered to be more respectable than others on account of their economic power. This caste may be called the master caste or dominant caste. So, the lower caste copies the lifestyle of the local dominant caste in order to improve their status. Now, let us study the effects of Sanskritisation. Sanskritisation in the social field, where the social aspect of Sanskritisation is much more important from the viewpoint of change. The low caste individuals are inclined towards Sanskritisation because in that way they can elevate their social status and get higher status in caste hierarchy. Sanskritisation in economic field, where one observes the economic betterment and Sanskritisation is another related issue. The lower caste people have given up uncleaned occupation to raise the economic status because clean trades are a symbol of social light. Sanskritisation in the religious field. Sanskritisation also can be observed in the religious field. Like Brahmins, many of the lower caste people put on sacred thread. They also go to their temple regularly and perform the aarti and bhajans. They have left the prohibited food and uncleaned occupations. Even they have specialized in performing ceremonies like Brahmins. Sanskritisation in living patterns. The living patterns of lower caste have also Sanskritized. Like higher caste, they also get pakka houses built for them, and now they sit along with the higher caste on the cots without any fear of hesitation. They also keep their houses clean and put on dresses like higher caste. Professor M.N. Srinivas for the first time used term Sanskritisation in his writing Religion and Society among the Coots of South India. The term refers to the process by which low Hindu caste or tribe or other group changes its customs, rituals, ideologies and ways of life in the direction of high twice born caste to acquire higher status. At first, Professor Srinivas used the term Brahmanization for this process, as he thought that the lower caste people must be trying to reach at the place of Brahmins. He replaced Brahmanization was replaced by Sanskritization, as low caste people not only followed Brahmins but also other caste groups. Sanskritization is a process of adaptation of rituals and lifestyles of higher caste by a lower caste. It also refers to the process in which the other groups who fall outside the Hindu caste structures like tribal groups enter into the Hindu fold. From all these definitions, few things are very clear. The model includes any higher social group. It is not restricted to Brahmins. The groups who follow the higher caste group constitute the lower caste groups as well as some groups who are outside the Hindu social structure. These groups are following customs, traditions, rituals, ideology and way of life of higher caste. The main objective of these lower caste groups is to attain higher social status through this process. Some important remarks of Sanskritisation are: the whole process is based on relative deprivation. The society has allotted prestige to the Brahmins, power to Kshatriyas and wealth to Vaishyas. The lower caste groups are deprived of all these benefits of the society. So, they want to raise their status. This process takes place for the lower caste people feel inferior to the higher caste groups. The feeling of inferiority complex compels the lower caste to raise their social status. They adopted the process of Sanskritisation to raise their social position. The concept of Sanskritisation is very closely related with the dominant caste. It helps in the process of cultural transmission. Sanskritisation occurs among those castes that enjoy economic and political powers, but have not achieved high ritual ranking. There is a gap between their politico-economic position and ritual position in the society. Economic betterment is not a precondition for Sanskritisation. It is not necessary that economic improvement leads to Sanskritisation, but in some cases it is observed that economic betterment helps in acquiring political power, and combined with economic and political power leads to the process of Sanskritisation. There are some factors which help to accelerate the process, such as desire to move upward, education, leadership, wealth, power in politics, etc. The unit of mobility in the process of Sanskritisation must be a group. The upward mobility of an individual or a family is not considered as Sanskritisation. In this process, emphasis is given to vertical mobility and not to the horizontal mobility. It refers to the cultural change or positional change, but not to structural change. The group has to wait for indefinite period to achieve the position in this process. The process depends on the structure of the social system. It will be easier if the society is flexible, open and free. In the historical context, Sanskritisation has been a process of social mobility throughout the history of Indian society. Now, let us focus on the limitations of the concept of Sanskritisation. It explains only socio-cultural mobility, and that too in a very limited way. Professor Srinivas is not clear about the fact that whether a lower caste as a whole moves to a higher strata, or only a group of Sanskritized families of a particular caste moves up, leaving behind the other families of the caste. He is also not clear about the fact that when a caste moves up, what happens to the vacant place. He remains silent about occupational mobility and division of labor, whether the Sanskritized group adopts the occupation of the new place or follows the same traditional occupation. This is a process in which the lower caste people follow the customs, traditions and practices of high caste people. But all these elements of high caste people are diluted condition due to various forces like modernization, westernization, education, etc. So, there is a confusion in imitating these elements. Nowadays, the process of desanskritization has also been started. Dominant caste may not allow the lower caste groups to reach at their place. It is a cultural change, leaving little scope to raise the social status. However, the process of sensitization is very helpful in explaining the complex pattern of the Indian culture. Now, what are the effects of Sanskritization on society? Sanskritization has an influential effect on society in many ways. More equality and liberty has come. Some scheduled caste adopted upper caste names, discovered myths about their origin and changed their traditional occupations. Now, they sit along with the higher caste without any fear or hesitation. There occurred the behavioral changes. Lower caste adopted other caste living patterns which gave them the liberty to sit and stand before other caste. For example, the low caste people were not keen to keep a clean atmosphere, but due to Sanskritization they started maintaining hygiene and they have left the prohibited food. They also keep their houses clean and put on dresses like higher caste. There is a value transmission which helped in socio-economic and cultural value transmission in several groups of society. We also observed the exposure to new ideas, where Sanskritization is not just the adoption of new customs and habits, but also includes exposure to new ideas and values appearing in Sanskrit literature. Some of the most common Sanskritic theological ideas like karma, dharma, pap, maya, samsara and moksha, which become common in the talk of people who are Sanskritized. There is redefinition of the caste system. Sanskritization challenged the then prevalent idea that caste was a rigid and unchanging institution. The concept of Sanskritization addressed the actual complexity and fluidity of caste relations. It brought into academic focus the dynamics of renegotiation of the status by various caste communities in India. There is societal upgradation of the lower caste. The low caste individuals are inclined towards Sanskritization because in that way they can elevate their social status and get higher status in the caste hierarchy. There is reduced untouchability. Now, the situation is that the untouchable practice is almost abolished from the society. There occurred the professional changes. The lower caste people have given up uncleaned occupation to raise their economic status because the clean trades are a symbol of social light. Many scheduled caste and tribes changed their dressing style and eating habits in a similar way of upper caste. But they had to face a lot of violence by upper caste for following their way of life. Though the process is followed by many, only those that are politically or economically powerful succeeded in the process. Let us observe Desanskritisation. Desanskritisation is the process by which a high or low caste person or a tribal accepts the membership of an untouchable caste and thereby lowers his social as well as ritual position. Also lost in his previous identity over a period of time, say in a generation or two. The process of Desanskritisation also involves imbibing the customs and the beliefs and adopting the way of life of an untouchable caste. And here the two levels of meanings which are implicit in Desanskritisation and which have been interchangeably used may be explained. The term is the Bangi caste, which is specific, and untouchable caste, specific connotations of Desanskritisation. In the Bangi caste specific sense, Desanskritisation refers to the process by which an upper caste person converts himself or herself into the Bangi fold and changes his or her status, customs, rituals and way of life in the manner of this particular caste, the Bangi. This is termed as Bangization. It is indicative in a definite sense of the social mobility in the Bangi untouchable caste of India and is specific in reference. In the untouchable caste, specific sense, however, desanskritization denotes a contemporaneous process in which upper caste individuals convert in general without any specific reference to any low caste or subcaste. The nature of this type of desanskritization is by no means uniform, as the untouchable caste into which the conversion has taken place will vary. Reflecting the diversity found among the untouchable caste, this is borne out by field observations. The Bangaization has two aspects. One may be called the positional aspect, which involves social falling of the individual through adoption of the customs and the practices of the Bangis. This process results in positional changes for the converting individuals. The other may be called the occupational aspect, which involves accepting scavenging as a job by the converting individuals and gradually projecting a Bangi image. Desanskritization is not confined to Hindu caste only, but also occurs among the non-Hindu groups such as the Muslims of Jodhpur. Conversion to Bangi caste in Rajasthan among the Bangis of the Jodhpur, the beginning of the desanskritization process can be traced back to as early as 1818. Desanskritization first began among the Muslims through their contact with Bangis in the Nagarpalikas of Jodhpur. Contact with the Jamedar, who used to be Muslim or high caste Hindu in the pre-independence era, led to close association between the Bangis and the upper caste. Desanskritization among the Muslims came initially through the Nivargar Muslims, the weaver caste. Later, it gradually spread through the higher caste Hindu population, whom the Bangis served under the Jajman Kamin relationship. Desanskritization is not confined to conversion to the Bangi caste, but has also occurred among other lower caste and the groups, such as the Bairwa of Savai Madhopur district during the last 50 years or so. This usually results in the upper caste persons undergoing desanskritization and caste wise lowering to Bairwa, an untouchable caste. Thus, in the desanskritization of the upper caste persons, there are both a Bairwa and a Bangi model. The process of desanskritization began in British India. The Bangis even converted a few upper caste Hindus in their early conversion phase, and gradually these individuals became an integrated part of the endogamous unit of the Bangi caste. There are concrete examples of conversion and changes of high caste identity from Brahmin Rajput, Baniya and so on. The converts are broadly divided into three religious groups: Hindus, Muslims and those belonging to tribes. The caste has its own self-image and identity, on the basis of which it considers itself historically as well as socio-culturally and nominalistically distinct from other caste, and tenaciously sticks to and justifies this identity. Despite various changes taking place in its life, it is in this sense of identity which is basic for the survival of a caste. There exists a vast body of data on cultural dynamics among the untouchable caste, which discusses various aspects of cultural and social changes and the factors responsible for them. However, such studies generally do not seem to relate to change of the identity of a caste. Now, let us sum up. To sum up the lesson, Sanskritization and Desanskritization, after the independence of the country, the issue of social mobility became more complex and cases of Sanskritization, Desanskritization as well as Re-Sanskritization were observed. Due to the policy of positive discrimination adopted by the Indian government, now an increasing number of groups laid claim to backward status rather than high status. Some of them claim a backward status in state matters and forward status in a society. In a particular form of social change found in India, it denotes the process by which the caste placed lower in the caste hierarchy seek upward mobility by emulating the rituals and practices of the upper or dominant caste. The concept Sanskritisation was first introduced by Professor M.N. Srinivas, the famous Indian sociologist. He explained the concept of Sanskritisation in his book Religion and Society among the Courts of South India to describe the cultural mobility in the traditional caste structure of Indian society. Thank you.